I'm Sandra Rupp. I was placed on the Thinkers 50 radar list for the world's top business thinkers. Welcome to my podcast. Today I want to talk about people, personality types, success, mindsets, and how to get along with all the Myers-Briggs personality types. I love that test. It was created by a mother-daughter team, and it's even used today in HR organizations around the country. I know some of the other people have tried to come up with better tests, but when it comes to being able to identify someone's personality type, I can meet them and do it without them even taking the test. So I interviewed people for a living in New York for many, many years, and I worked as an executive search consultant in multiple industries. I have met extraordinary leaders around the globe, and I've had the opportunity to kind of identify patterns of success in people. And I wanted to share some of that today because I think it will help everyone understand how people are different. I think, we take it for granted that, everyone thinks like we do. Well, that's just not the way the world works. And that's why you have to become really good at understanding different personality types and different types of people. There are physical energy people, there are mental energy people, there are people that have both of those skills. There are people who are high sensation seekers, who are big risk takers, but they need to be managed by the people who are highly sensitive, who understand the risks. You can find those qualities in the same leader once in a while, but it's pretty rare. But I've met some of those leaders too. And I just want to talk today about the amazing people that I've met and some of the patterns that I've seen. The American system of education that I grew up in was very much based upon competition, sports, but also getting a really good education. I went to graduate school at Northwestern, got my MBA, and was lucky enough to be in the company of a lot of very talented people. And when I graduated, I moved to New York and built my career there, first in the media business and then in the executive search industry. And I identified some interesting patterns. It got to the point where later in my career, mid-career, later career, I'd meet people and I would say, that reminds me of, this other person that I met. And I started to think about these trends and what I saw. And so when I meet someone, let's say, who's a marathon runner, there was a popularity of doing marathons among a lot of people in business. The runner types, they may do the running, the biking, the swimming. Those are very physical energy people. Sometimes they're more introverted, not always, but sometimes, because they do spend a lot of time training for those sports. They're very methodical, they're very organized, and that really became a type of a leader that I saw. The only challenge there in executive coaching, I now do executive coaching from Florida, and I do that internationally. But what I found is that sometimes what you have to do with that kind of leader is make them more aware that not everyone is like them. Not everyone, wants to go running first thing in the morning. We have night owls out there who are brilliant people. And we have people that are mental energy people. I actually am one of those people. So what that means is that I run a marathon in my head every day. And it generally comes through reading 24 global publications, trying to figure out the current events of the day. That's very important for me to stay on top of. It's not easy to do in a world where the media is run primarily by left-wing propaganda. And so the media used to be owned by 50 corporations, and in the US it's now down to 6. And they're pretty much based out of New York. So it tends to have more of a liberal bias. And that's why people like me really choose to watch original speeches. We read other publications internationally and locally and nationally. And it's important to question what you read. And so I can spend all day reading, talking to people, doing my executive coaching, And by the end of the day, I'm really tired because I've run a marathon in my head. And I think some of you who are management consultants or executive coaches or software engineers, whatever you do, I'm sure you can understand what I'm saying, because after that long day of thinking, you need to have some downtime. For a lot of us who are introverts, it comes from quiet time, one-on-one time with a friend, but it doesn't come from, going to a pub and drinking a beer with a group of people, because that actually can be stressful for us. So I enjoy dinner parties and cocktail parties, but more on a planned basis. And Friday nights, I'm pretty tired. I don't know about you. But what I've also found is that there are some people who are like the 9 to 6 kind of workers, very methodical. Maybe they get in at 8 to 6. But there are other people who are night owls, where they might come into the office, let's say 9:30, 9:45, but they're at their desk at 7:30, 8 o'clock at night, sometimes later, and they'll take their work home and they'll be up in the middle of the night working. So it really depends what your style is. One is not better than the other. So I would encourage anyone who's running a team or managing people to recognize that it's good to have people that are not alike on your team. I'm a big proponent of diversity of thought, and that includes diversity of political thought. And that's something that I think is so important for CEOs in today's world to understand, is that you don't want everyone thinking alike. Okay, General George S. Patton had a famous quote, "If everyone's thinking alike, then somebody isn't thinking." And it's true. You want people that think different. I am also a divergent thinker, so I don't go along with something just because, someone I respect says something. I have to read about it, question it, and I have to come up with my own informed opinion. So interestingly enough, divergent thinkers often, they question the status quo, but they can often be right. And so just as an example of that, I questioned the COVID vaccine because I thought they were rolling it out much too fast. I looked up the CEOs of the pharmaceutical companies. It's an industry that I had recruited in a long time ago. And I felt that it was very much an industry that was dominated by at the top by an interest in making a lot of money. And you see that the pharma CEOs are now billionaires. So it has to be money driven. I just don't believe that CEOs of publicly traded companies should become billionaires unless they're a founder of the business and they own stock that way. I just don't understand why we've allowed that to happen. I don't think it's been good for America. And I am concerned about what I've seen at Davos. I think there's a greed. And when you get a bunch of STEM majors in the room and it's 75% men, you're missing out on a lot of important knowledge around the humanities and history. I was a history major. And there are a lot of things that you learn in history that are very relevant to leadership and decision making. So that's where I come in. I can help people think different. And understand different types of people, how to communicate better with those people, how to motivate those people, and how to value those people. So whether you are someone who is highly sensitive, that's a good thing. I'm also highly sensitive, and it's my greatest strength. And whenever you hear someone say, "Oh, you're too sensitive," that's not the case. Highly sensitive animals in the animal kingdom, they end up saving the other animals. Like in that tsunami back in Thailand years ago, I think it was around 2006, the sensitive elephants and other animals started walking up to higher ground in the hills. And there were very few animals killed in that tsunami because the sensitive elephants and animals and birds have a sixth sense for danger. And I have that. Like, I can tell when the air changes or there's danger in the air. I was on a motorcycle once with a good friend of mine, and he was a very experienced motorcyclist. He had looked at the forecast. There was no rain, on the forecast. But when we got close to a mountain, I felt the precipitation coming, and it was snow, which actually created a very dicey situation on a mountain in Arizona for us. And I got him to take the motorcycle aside, and I helped him get down with the car falling in the back. And he said, "Sandra, you saved my life." So he said that to his assistant. Anyway, helps to have those highly sensitive people around. And they also are great empathizers. Sensitive people take time to understand people's feelings. And that's important because 70% of women are feelers. Only 30% of men are feelers, by the way. And in the corporate world, I think there's too much thinking historically. I was educated in that world, and I became like them, very thinking oriented, but I was going against my type. And so now what I try and do is, yes, in the corporate conversations, it's predominantly thinking mode. But you also want to take a moment to empathize with people and their feelings. I just lost a pet, and it was a very, very difficult experience for me. And I have so many friends out there who have lost pets, and now we have something, new to discuss or to bond over. And so when you are able to understand people's feelings, you get into a much better situation of being able to develop good leadership relationships with them. And I've seen this on boards too, because I've coached people, women, on how to get on boards. And you need to have people that communicate well. And communicating well is actually picking up the phone, because you can't get the nuances of a good discussion on email or text. And so I use text very rarely. I really believe in picking up the phone and calling someone. It's a much better way to communicate. I don't particularly like emails because I get way too many of them, and it's hard to keep up with all the emails. But I do believe that if you have an important conversation and you're in a leadership position, you should pick up the phone or express that in a formal meeting. I believe that we need to have more personal dialogues with people, and mediation was probably my number one class, or one of my top classes in business school. I was really good at getting to yes. So if there are two people in a room and they disagree on a topic, I can usually get them to come to some sort of collaborative decision. That's why I think I was really good in executive search, because I had great intuition. I could interview someone and know if they were going to fit with the hiring manager and the company that I was representing, and rarely, made mistakes on that. But I did like to have diverse candidate slates. So I was the kind of person who, always tried to achieve a diverse candidate slate. I wouldn't say all my colleagues necessarily did that, but that was something that I was focused on as a minority in business. And yes, I felt that I was a minority in business because I was a woman, and I was a feminine woman. And I do think that, there's a real importance of having feminine women on senior leadership teams, because they are the role models for the next generation. You see so many women coming up, but they need to have feminine role models, not masculine ones. There are some women who are more masculine. I'm not one of them. I don't want to be. So I actually want to use my sensitivity, my intuitive skills, and my creativity to be a great leader. And that's why I really want everyone to understand that leadership doesn't just come in one form or fashion. Leadership can be a man in a suit. It can be a woman in a pretty dress. It could be a Indian man in a turban. It could be a lot of different types of people. And so I really want everyone to understand that leadership doesn't just have one look. It doesn't just have one thought. It doesn't always agree with the boss in the room. So If you're working on a board, you don't want to just agree with everything the president of the board says. You want to have an informed discussion and respectfully share your opinions, and a good leader will want to hear your opinions. If you are working with a CEO, you want to make sure that he's a good listener, because it's probably the most important skill of a CEO. And the reason that I believe you're seeing a lot more introverted CEOs is because listening is increasingly a top CEO skill. You cannot have, in the businesses that we have now, there's a lot more data-driven businesses and businesses that require analysis and thinking. So just being sort of like an extroverted CEO who has a lot of buddies doesn't cut it anymore. So you need to go beyond people who are just good salespeople to people that really have it all in terms of intelligence, intellectual curiosity, ability to get along with different types of people. The disabled crowd is kind of an interesting group of people right now that are now, for the first time, getting their say in the corporate world. And there are a lot of autistic people, as an example, who are brilliant. And instead of putting them in a low-wage job, I would like to see corporations learn how to value autistic people, as an example. And corporations need to do a better job on understanding women and highly sensitive people. Highly sensitive people have a more attuned central nervous system, so they can't work in open plan office environments that are noisy, as an example. They need private space behind closed doors to do their best work. So all those extroverted CEOs who created those bullpen environments, that didn't work for a lot of women I know and a lot of sensitive people I know. So I have to have those discussions with a lot of male CEOs. Yes, it's mostly male CEOs out there. And over time that will change. But these conversations that I have, I find are easier when the CEO has daughters. Okay, if Jamie Dimon has 3 daughters, that helps. A CEO who has all sons, I've worked with them too, much different conversation. And there's a real learning curve. Women need to be treated with respect and friendship and honesty. And a lot of men are allergic to treating women the same as men. And that's kind of what holds them back as leaders, because, you can't just invite your buddies out for a beer and not invite the woman in the office. You can make it more of like a social event or a dinner or a lunch, but you need to invite everyone and be inclusive in those dialogues, because those conversations that happen over a beer or a lunch or a glass of wine, those matter, because that's how sometimes business is done, a golf game, what have you. In the physical energy world, I mentioned the marathon runners earlier. You also have, of course, the golfers. You have the motorcycle riders. Met a few of those too, the high risk types. Fortunately, the one that I was good friends with also had the high sensitivity gene. So he was able to manage risk. And even though he took a lot of risk, he also, wore all of the right equipment, dressed for the part. And even when he had a motorcycle accident, he didn't die because he had all the best equipment on. So it does pay to wear those helmets and that special Under Armour equipment. It can save your life. The skiers, that's another group that's probably more risk-oriented. The world travelers. And there are people that need to be on the road or enjoy exploration. I'm not sure how much work they actually get done. I kind of question the need for CEOs to be traveling 70% of the time. Honestly, I don't see why that would be necessary in an environment that is. I've seen them on Zoom calls. They're very efficient. And so I'd like to see CEOs walk the talk of cutting back on their own carbon footprints, these liberal CEOs, they travel all around the world and tell everyone else to stop traveling, but they need to walk the talk instead of like going around as if they're special or something. I mean, some of them, I really question their value systems. And I remind people that conservatives, we're the first to care about the environment. So we're all in on this together. So recycle and those types of things are the most important. It's not about an economic mechanism. It's not about the Paris Accord. It's actually about walking the talk every single day through recycling and not, flying when you don't need to, not driving when you don't need to. I've probably got one of the lowest carbon footprints of anyone, but I also eat really healthy, and I don't get sick. Knock on wood. I, like anyone, I have some risk factors, and I manage those risks. But I believe that what we need to do in our lives is to understand that everyone is different. If someone needs quiet time, give them quiet time. If someone needs to be around people, find a job for them where they're around people. You need to fit the person to the job, and you can't make someone like you. I think that's probably the sign of someone who's not going to be a great leader, is someone who wants people to be like them, because there are 16 personality types according to Myers-Briggs. And chances are, some people are introverted, some are extroverted, some are in between. Some people are intuitive, some people are sensors. Some people have to gather the facts. They cannot make a gut feel decision. Other people get a gut feel decision. There are thinkers, there are feelers. I touched on that earlier, the differences between men and women. You can always spot a female thinker. They're very logical. But you know what? They actually probably have some feeling in them if you look for it. And so do male thinkers. So, I would encourage the male and female thinkers to try and find your feeling space sometimes and share it with those feelers out there on your team. The other measure of Myers-Briggs is perceiving versus judging. And perceivers are more spontaneous, probably more entrepreneurial, flexible. I'm a perceiver, so I like to perceive. I don't make quick judgments. Judgers are more organized. They make lists, but they judge. And so with my judgers, I always have to coach them not to rush to judgment. And that's probably their Achilles heel. Don't rush to judgment just because someone does something different than you. And if you're a censor and a judger, you have an even bigger challenge there, because you get really agitated when people don't think like you. But the reality is most people don't think like you. And that's something I wish that they had taught in school. Most people are not like you, because if you understood the personality types, they now do this in high schools and pre-K and some religions. Before you get married, they'll give you the Myers-Briggs test. They do it in HR departments to manage your team, 360-degree feedback. You need to understand the type of person that you're dealing with. What is their personality type? Are they physical energy? Are they mental energy? How do they like to spend their time? When do they feel in their zone? When are they creative? When do they feel most creative? If they don't want to be creative, they may be more practical type people. Put them on a practical project. But you cannot make people into something that they're not. It's like trying to make an animal into something they're not. Like, if you're a lion, you're a lion, okay? You're not going to be a dove, okay? You need to also manage those lions not to hurt the doves. So as a leader, your most important role is to value each type of individual and not judge any one of them. And the new model of executive coaching that I helped create, actually, executive coaching used to be dominated by men. And then people like me came into it and got interesting clients, and I changed the way of thinking around some of the executive coaching community, because instead of going in and saying, I'm going to fix someone, I said, I'm going to understand that person, who they are, and I'm going to make them a better leader. But I'm not going to fix them just because their boss doesn't like how they do things. Okay, so I may actually have to coach the boss and the person that reports to them, but I am going to make sure that everyone can work together and be productive. So if you have a CEO who wants to hire an executive coach to train people to be just like him or her, you've got a problem on your hands right there. As an HR person, human resources person, you need to coach the executive or CEO that the goal is not to make people the same. The goal is to understand the differences and to create a very vibrant team. And again, that includes diversity of personality types, gender, diversity of political thought. Some people may be disabled, certainly, diverse in terms of minorities. We shouldn't even call them minorities anymore, but we should have Hispanic, Black, Indian people, all different types of people on our team. It makes it a more vibrant team. And I think CEOs are starting to get that. But it's important that when I look at a corporation and I look at their website and I see an all-white male leadership team, I'm like, what is wrong with this picture? Has this CEO been living in the past? And I'm not saying it has to be 50% women, because if you're going to have women on your leadership team, please make sure they're qualified, and make sure that you have feminine women on that team, that they're not all masculine, because they're going to fight with one another and it won't be good. You want women to have a voice. So generally, to have a voice, women have to have 3 members on the CEO team or board. You can't just have 1 or 2, because unfortunately there are women who just go along with the men, or the man on top, and they're just really order takers. So they're not expressing their own opinion, and then if the other woman expresses her opinion, she's overlooked. So you really need 3 women on a team, just like you need 3 men if you want to have voices. I think McKinsey's got the research on that one, so you can look it up. I've spent a lot of time reading, McKinsey Quarterly, Wall Street Journal, Financial Times, all kinds of publications. I've noticed that some of them have become too liberal and more like propaganda of the World Economic Forum. So I just want to close with something that's very important to me, which is that I recently posted on my Davos blog that I would not attend World Economic Forum even if they paid me $1 million. I have gotten to the point where I am so against this conference. I've been told by top CEOs that they don't want more women there, that they're communist, they want to destroy the United States. So, to me, every American company, every global company based in the United States who cares about America should drop out of World Economic Forum. Klaus Schwab does not have your best interests at heart, nor the interests of your people. If you look at the big cities and the protests and how people who attend World Economic Forum have funded very negative activities in the city. I've seen CEOs at Davos say, oh, we should legalize all drugs. Well, look what's happened. You're having the cities become these unsafe places for women and children. There are druggies walking down the street. There's crime. Don't let them get your guns. There's a reason the Founding Fathers the Bill of Rights talk about the right to bear arms. Read your Bill of Rights, the First Amendment, the Second Amendment. The reason you have guns is to protect your freedom of speech. That's why America was founded. I encourage everyone to read up on constitutional studies and American history. Hillsdale College has a great course out there if you want to sign up. You can sign up your young people too. I give all my nieces, my nephews more recently, I've given them a copy of the U.S. Constitution. It's important to have that and to understand it. And to be a leader, you need to know the history. Okay, whatever you're going into, whatever project, I find when I go into, like if I'm on a new board or I'm getting involved in a new project, you don't want to just keep doing things the way they were done, because oftentimes you can do better. But you need to know the history of why things were set up the way they were and then make the changes appropriately. It takes time. It's hard to make quick changes, but keep on pushing and keep on looking for the right people and let people express their opinions and talk. Have conversations on the phone, have conversations in person, and don't cut anyone out, because cutting people out by talking negatively about people behind their back, that actually always backfires. That doesn't work in the corporate world. People like that don't survive. They never move up. You'll always stay in middle management if that's what you're up to. You need to have enough of good communication skills and understanding of other people to be a good communicator and a good listener. And I'm always impressed by leaders who I meet who can understand everyone on their team. It doesn't mean that they're like the person on their team, but it means that they can understand them. And by understanding the different personality types, gender differences, physical energy, masculine energy, we could get into the mental energy. We could get into even astrology. I mean, the fire signs versus the earth signs. We could talk about a lot of things, but people are different. There's no question about it. Whatever motivates it, their lifestyle, their spouse, who they grew up with, if they're single, everyone has a story to tell. And one of the things that I would like to do is to have people on my podcast to interview them about their story. And I think by sharing more stories that are different from, the historically white male, sports-oriented stories, maybe we'll get more awareness that it's okay to have vulnerability. It's okay to be sensitive. It's okay to be sad. If you had a loss in your family, take the time to get over it, because if you push it aside, it will come back to haunt you. So you need to take a time out, and you need to let people on your team take a time out, and you need to make sure that you invite them back in and you do the best job of leadership that you can do. I'm Sandra Rupp. I'd like to thank you so much for listening. We have video viewers in 168 countries. It's a fairly small audience because it was based upon covering some top conferences, but we have some of the most interesting people in the world listening and watching, and we'd like to build that to a larger audience and invite more people in. So I'm excited to have you all here, and thank you again. If you'd like to subscribe to my YouTube channel, it's Sandra Rupp on YouTube. If you'd like to follow my tweets, I'm at Exec Career Coach on Twitter. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn for executive coaching, and I am happy to have a complimentary conversation with you to see if it's a fit and if we might be able to work together. Please have a good day and stay tuned. I'm Sandra Rupp. Thanks so much for watching.